Malachi chapter 1. Malachi chapter 1. Thankful to be in the service tonight. Glad to see each one that's here. We want to begin reading in verse 6, Malachi chapter 1, verse 6. The book of Malachi is kind of the last word from the Lord. After the book of Malachi began the silent years. The Lord is telling them basically in chapter 3 that He will send His messenger before the Messiah comes. In chapter 3 you can see that. He's speaking there of John the Baptist, that he would prepare the way for the Lord. And so basically the Lord's telling them, this is my last conversation with you. This is the last discussion. From this point, the Lord is silent. And there's a lot of history. There's a lot of things that were written during that 400 years, but they are not and have been declared not inspired. That because of the Lord basically telling them He's not going to speak there until John the Baptist comes on the scene, which is where the Gospels pick up. And so Apocrypha, 14 books that were taken out, that kind of fit into that period. They were all written during that period of time in the 400 years of silence. Malachi is a book that's, God is being very straightforward with His people. It follows a pattern, and you can see this pattern when we begin to read in verse 6. God throws and gives an accusation about His people. He tells them what they've been doing wrong or what they've done wrong very clearly. And you see their argument, their excuse. And often that comes with a few words, I guess, that would go before it. Is it yet ye say? That's one of the key phrases, I think, of the book of Malachi. You see it over and over again. God would tell them that they've done something, and they say, yet ye say, wherein have we done this thing? Shall a man rob God? Yet ye say, wherein have we robbed the Lord? And then God gives evidence of how they've done this. And typically what you see taking place in the book of Malachi is that the people are hung in their minds on serving God one-dimensionally. They're serving God just on the surface. There's no depth of the service. There's no depth of heart. There's no truth in it. There's no true passion in serving Him. And often because of that, they're missing the point, which is what God is trying to show them. You're missing the point. And that's the case with what we're going to read tonight. Verse 6, he says, a son honoreth his father, and a servant his master. If then I be a father, where is mine honor? And if I be a master, where is my fear, saith the Lord of hosts unto you? O priests that despise my name. And ye say, wherein have we despised thy name? Ye have offered polluted bread upon mine altar. And ye say, wherein have we polluted thee? In that ye say, the table of the Lord is contemptible. And if ye offer the blind for sacrifice, is it not evil? And if ye offer the lame and sick, is it not evil? Offer it now unto thy governor. Will he be pleased with thee, or accept thy person, saith the Lord of hosts? And now I pray you, beseech God, that He will be gracious unto us. This hath been by your means, will he regard your persons, saith the Lord of hosts. Who is there even among you that would shut the doors for naught? Neither do ye kindle fire on mine altar for naught. I have no pleasure in you, saith the Lord of hosts. Neither will I accept mine offering at your hand. For from the rising of the sun even unto the going down of the same, my name shall be great among the Gentiles. And in every place incense shall be offered unto my name, and a pure offering. For my name shall be great among the heathen, saith the Lord of hosts. I'm going to stop reading there in verse 11. Now I want you to notice, kind of if you look at the whole reading, especially that last verse and what the Lord is telling them through Malachi concerning the heathen and the Gentiles. What he's telling them is, you've despised my name, but one day the heathen are going to glorify my name. You've put me down, you've despised me, but one day the heathen are going to uphold me, and they'll offer incense to my name. So the accusation that God is throwing at them is that they've despised his name. Now if you go back to verse 2, the first thing that he charges them with is the fact that they have not recognized his love for them. I have loved you, and yet ye say, wherein hast thou loved us? Show us. Show us how you've loved us, you know. And so they're not recognizing, and now he's turning the tables on them and said, but you've despised me. I've loved you, and you've despised my name. And so that's the charge, that's the accusation that God is giving to the people through the person of Malachi, through the prophet Malachi, the nation of Israel at the time. Now you can imagine about how this would go over with the people of Israel as they would hear this. You've despised my name. What? What would they counter to? Where would they go? Hold on. Look what we've done for you. Is that not exactly what the people do in the day of judgment? When Jesus says, depart from me, you workers of iniquity, that I never knew you. And they say what? Have we not done many wonderful works in thy name? They immediately go back to, look at what we've done. And so they're looking at it from that physical idea. We've done this work. Well, Israel would have been the same way. And I think that this accusation probably would have been just to be frank, it would have been a bit of a punch in the gut spiritually for them to have heard this, if they, in the sense that they're trying to keep things going according to the law. Now remember, this is just 400 years before Jesus comes on the scene. In this 400-year period of time, the Pharisees come on the scene. All of these political arrangements that keep going, but I want you to understand that the law is continually going on. They haven't abandoned the system of the law. They haven't abandoned the temple. They haven't abandoned the sacrifices. They're still doing those things. There's still showbread on the table. There's still fire burning. In fact, you go back and there's some times where, during these 400 years of silence, where the temple is trouble there, that it's the candlesticks are taken down, and it's not. But in fact, the book of the Maccabees, that was part of the Apocrypha, talks about them coming back and reestablishing this system of worship in a 7-day or 8-day period of time in which God kept the candle burning when they had no oil. That's where the idea of Hanukkah comes from. And that's all recorded in the book of the Maccabees. It's just history. It's historical evidence that's given there, written in kind of the historical perspective of the nation of Israel. And so to see that, they say, well, it would almost be like, well, what are you talking about? And that's what they're saying. You say, wherein have we despised your name? What are you doing? What are you talking about? Wherein have we despised your name? Look what we're doing for you. The law is still going on. We're still keeping the sacrifice. We're still doing these things. We still got the temple and everything. It's just right on trucking like we've been doing the whole time. Everything seems to be going okay. Why do you think that we've despised your name? That's kind of the idea. The word despised, by the way, means meaningless. You know, we typically use the word, it's kind of the same thing that he uses there in verse 3, and he says, yet I've hated Esau. You know, we use the word hate in a completely different way. The idea of hate is the idea of despise, which just means there's no value there. It's worthless. And Esau was not worthless to God in that there was never an opportunity for Esau to be saved. But it's that Esau had chosen a particular way and that he had set his path against the Lord. And yet, you know, that's what the Lord found there. The same word is in verse 7. You come on down and it says that ye say that the table of the Lord or the altar of the Lord is contemptible. The word contemptible is the same idea as the word despise. In fact, if you look up the Hebrew meaning of the word despise, it's contemptible. It just means there's no value. It's meaningless. It's worthless. It's common. It's something you do every day. You know, we get to the place that let me just ask you this. What's the time, and it's going to seem like an odd question, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from because it's a very natural example. When do you brush your teeth more? What's the time that you brush your teeth the most in order that you, not just that you could get everything out of them, but that you could really take care of your teeth? Isn't it right after you get out of the dentist and he tells you, you better do something? You got problems. And so we tend to begin to brush our teeth a little bit more. Maybe we floss like we should. 6, 7 months down the road, 2, 3 years down the road, we kind of just do the same habit. We just going through the motions of brushing our teeth. You know, it's bedtime. Brush our teeth. You know, run over it real quick, and here we go. You know, if we're not careful, we can do the Lord the same way. So much so that His work becomes common to us. And His services meaningless. And we make it, that's wonderful. And we're going to we try to brush our teeth. But we're here. And then what happens? So every now and then, you know, something comes along and things get difficult. We have to suffer a little bit. Things get real difficult, so we run in. All right, we're going to get serious about this thing now. Right back in the same shape. That's about where the children of Israel had gotten themselves to. You've despised my name. It's meaningless. My altar is contemptible. And then you notice verse 7, he says, you offer polluted bread. Now, really, this kind of the evidence, okay, so you see the accusation is that you have despised my name. My name is worthless among you. My name is meaningless. And so then immediately, they say, well, wherein do you say, their excuses, wherein do you say that we've despised your name? I mean, you kind of think, still got all of this going on. And then the Lord offers 2 pieces of evidence. One of which he says that you offered polluted bread upon mine altar. And ye say, wherein have we polluted thee, in that ye say the table of the Lord is contemptible. Now notice the interchangeability or the interchangeableness of the word table and altar. They're the same thing. So the point is, you say, well, it's really the same thing. he's not talking about the polluted bread being the table of showbread. I don't believe. It could be, and that's okay. But I think he's talking about the idea of bread as the meat offering. The meat in general. And so you've offered polluted things upon the altar of the Lord. And so what makes you think that we've done that? Well, you're offering the lame. You're offering the blind for a sacrifice. What were they supposed to offer? Well, they were supposed to offer, obviously, the very best that they had. They were supposed to offer the lambs without blemish. They were supposed to offer the ones that had no problem or nothing going on, no lame, that's not sick. There's no why is that the case? Because it would have been human nature that if you had to offer one up and you had to get rid of one, if you got to sell a cow, what cow you want to sell? Well, you want to sell the one that's having trouble in labor. You want to sell the one that's prone to sickness. You want to sell the one that's trouble. And so you tend to, that's human nature. That's going to be the one you want to offer up to the Lord. But he's already given them a very strict commandment not to do that. The one that you offer to the Lord better be the best of the bunch. It's got to be perfect, without blemish in it at all. And they're not doing that. This is the evidence. You're offering the lame and the sick. You can kind of look at us and our sacrifices, I guess, a little bit in that. And what is it that we offer to the Lord? So you see this accusation and a charge, and I want to try to use this for just a few minutes tonight to have a look at ourselves. What's being called into question among these people is that their value that they find in God's name. The value of God's presence with them. The value of this relationship that they have with the Lord. They are a nation that is to be set apart. They are a nation that is to be that light to the world. They are to uphold. Jerusalem was supposed to be a city set on a hill that could not be hid. That was God's plan and purpose for it. But it was a city that was no different than any other city of the world. And that because they despised God's name. They found no value in the relationship that they had with God. They were just like any other nation because they found no value in what they had with the Lord. Because they found no value there. Now, I want you to stop and think about, well, what does that mean? What is he calling in? We talk about worship. That is the epitome of worship. That is where worship begins. One of the you find times where there are hot button words. I guess we tend to, as a society, we go through different words and we tend to get on topics and we kind of hang up there and we'll be there for a little while and move on to something else. And you can see that if you follow food packages right now. If you look at food packages, organic's the word. If you want your item to sell, write organic across it. It'll probably sell. That's what we look for. We want to see that something's organic. When it comes to the Lord, we want to see the word worship. What kind of worship do you have? We want good worship. What does that mean? What does that mean? I want good worship. And so that's kind of one of the themes of the day. When you begin to look at any religious organization, they begin to come worship with us. I grew up, I didn't hear the word worship a whole lot. We didn't go worship, we just went to church. But now we go worship. And it's nothing different, it's just a word. Well, it's made me go back and kind of reevaluate the word and learn a little bit more about it. And I've done that for quite a few years now. And worship really looks a lot different than what we make it out to be often. So what do we say? Well, is there real worship there? Well, what are you talking about? You're talking about an experience of what are you going to feel when the music's played? You know, does worship depend on the right style of music? Does worship depend on the ability of the preacher to preach? Let me back that up a little bit. Depend on the preacher's ability to speak. Because the word is to be preached in demonstration and power of the Spirit of God. What that means is that if we're in the right spirit, then His Spirit is bearing witness with our spirit as we're hearing the Word of God, and He's conveying the message to our heart. So what do we mean when we say the word worship? Now, worship literally is our value of God in everyday life. Our value of God in any given moment. We actively, physically worship when we come together to praise His name. But you can come into a place, you can walk in a building and sing a song and never worship at all if your heart's not right. So, I want you to notice what the Lord does here. As He says, you've despised my name. I'm meaningless to you. I'm of no value to you. You do not worship me. That's what He's saying. You do not worship me. And so they say in response to this, and ye say, wherein have we despised your name? Wherein have we done this? We've got the worship services going on. We're sacrificing animals. We're singing psalms. The word's being taught in the synagogues, in the temple. All of this is going on. How can you say that we're not worshiping you? So what does the Lord do? What evidence does He go to? And this is where I want you to notice. This is what I want you to see. He goes immediately to prove that they don't worship Him, He goes immediately to their sacrifices. Immediately. Look at what you're sacrificing. Today, if you want to see whether or not you're truly worshiping the Lord, look at what you sacrifice. If you sacrifice for Him, you love Him and you worship Him. If you do not sacrifice anything for Him and you have trouble coming up with something to sacrifice that you've sacrificed for Him, you might better take stock of what you're doing for the Lord. What if through your life are the things that you've given up for Him? All right, so I want to read just a couple of scriptures, or a few verses to show this, to prove this scripturally. So what He's doing, again, the Lord is proving the fact that they do not worship Him. Worship for the Lord begins at sacrifice. Worship for the Lord begins at sacrifice. This is no different than any other relationship. And say, well, I love my wife. I love my husband. Anything of the nature. If you, young folks, I want you to hear me. First off, you shouldn't be dating unless it's for the purpose of trying to find somebody to be married. That's the only reason to ever date. If you're not looking for somebody to marry, dating is not for fun. It's not. I'll tell you what dating for fun will do. Get you in a lot of trouble. That's all it's ever going to do. If you find yourself in a relationship with somebody and you are the only one that's sacrificing for that relationship, get out. Because he or she does not love you. If they're not willing to make a sacrifice for that relationship, they don't love you. That's true in any relationship. And so the Lord is simply looking at, what are you willing to give up? Are you willing to walk away from your life for Him? As we mentioned this morning, he that would save his life will lose it, but he that would lose his life for my sake shall find it. If you're willing to sacrifice your life in worship for the Lord, He will give you life. But if you're not willing to do that, then you'll lose that you have. In 1 Peter, you don't have to turn this. You probably know the verse very well, and you just jot it down if you're taking notes. In 1 Peter chapter 2, this verse, I'm just going to read it so you can catch the context. Wherefore lay aside all malice, guile, and hypocrisies, and envies, and evil speaking, as newborn babes. Desire the sincere milk of the word, that you may grow thereby. If so be ye have tasted the Lord is gracious, to whom coming as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God and precious. Ye also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house and holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. How do you know whether or not we are worshiping the Lord? When we give up what we want for Him. That is the epitome of worship. That's where it begins. That's where the worship of the Lord starts. So let me ask you this today. You take the heart that you've come here tonight with, the attitude, the spirit. If you offered that attitude and that spirit at work, how long would you keep a job? If we paid our taxes like we went to church, would the IRS be knocking on our door? The point is that would we ever get a promotion? I had a man tell me this one day, and I may have mentioned it here before, but I had a man tell me one day, I was at a little church, and I was trying to serve the Lord, and I had a burden. I wanted to be used to the Lord. And the Lord was using me, and He was, I really got familiar with that song, Little Is Much If God Is In It, A little church, and I loved the people. I learned to really love them. And I was there for about a year, but I struggled in that year. And one of the things that God was teaching me during that period of time in my life as the minister there is that if this is what I've called you to do it with all your heart. And stop worrying about being the big preacher, the little preacher, this preacher, that, or anything. Quit being a competition. Just do what I've asked you to do. So I asked an older preacher one day, I said, I like everybody else, I desire to be used of the Lord. I said, I'm thankful for what the Lord's given me, but I would really like the opportunity to pastor somewhere, it's got really just say, I'd like to pastor the big church. That's really what I was telling him, And he said, so you wanting God to give you a promotion? Yeah. He said, don't expect God to give you a promotion if you're not faithful in what He's given you to do today. How can we ever expect God to give us better if we're not doing anything with what He's already given us? In fact, that's not just my words, that's Jesus' words Himself. He goes on to make the statement, I think it's in the book of Luke, I'd have to look it up, but he makes a statement, if my memory serves me right, that if you don't use what you have that God's given you, how can you expect the Father to give unto you the true riches? And the Lord's asking, there in the book of Malachi, the Lord's asking these people the exact same question. What are you doing? If you offered what you're offering to me, if you went and offered that to the governor, would he accept it? Well, it's a rhetorical question, and it's obvious that the answer is no. He's not going to accept that. And so worship begins when we truly begin to value God. The songs, the word, or the preaching, or the message within the doctrinal, all of that. All of that's just stuff that's just physical. And the physical's never, you'll never sing a song with all, I'll tell you, you'll never sing Amazing Grace like it needs to be sung until you experience the amazing grace of God. You cannot. If you're lost and maybe you love singing. I grew up, I loved singing even before I got saved. But I could never sing Amazing Grace before I got saved. I never sang it the same since. Because I've experienced the grace of God in a way that's completely different. Do y'all ever get tired of that song? Y'all, you think I'm crazy, but I grew up here, and they led this song when I was growing up. They led this song if they let it once. All the time I heard the song Victory in Jesus. I didn't care if I ever heard that song again. Victory in Jesus. The song sounds different today than what it used to sound. And it has nothing to do with the beat. It has nothing to do with the melody. But it has everything to do with a reminder that Christ has given me the victory. But when we're so stuck in the sound and the simplistic things of worship, when we're always stuck in the appearance of worship, we've missed the truth of worship, which begins in the sacrifice of the heart for the Lord. Worship begins in the heart. So let me ask you this. I don't like to use the word accepted, but the Lord used it here, and I'll explain to you why in just a moment. But I want you to notice, did the Lord accept it? Notice what he says in verse 10. He says, who is he, or who is there even among you that would shut the doors for naught? Neither do you kindle fire on mine altar for naught. I have no pleasure in you. Again, this is because they're not sacrificing. They're just going through the motions. There's no true sacrifice. The Lord's coming. There's no concern. There's no true worship for him in their heart. They're just going through the motions of this. And so he says, the Lord of hosts, neither will I accept an offering at your hand. I'm not going to accept it. I don't accept your worship. So let me ask you this tonight, not as a church, but as an individual. Does God accept your worship? Does God accept your worship? And I guess one of the reasons I don't really like that phrasing is because God is not sitting in heaven saying, okay, he really worshiped me and I'm going to accept that and reward him this way, and this one didn't really worship me and I'm not going to accept this one. It's not that God's sitting up here just accept, and we kind of get this idea of it's just, he's stamping it, accepted or rejected or something like that. That's not what God's doing. But the point is this, And what God's trying to make very clear to them is either in your heart you are truly valuing God, which is evident by your willingness to sacrifice for Him, or either you in your heart do not value Him at all, and so you are not willing to sacrifice anything for Him. You're going to live your own life, and He is meaningless to you. In which case He will not accept that offering of sacrifice. You can come sing all day long. You're not worshiping Him. You can sing the songs. You can shake your head. You can say amen. But until you get to the point that God means enough to you to give up yourself for Him, then you're not worshiping Him. True worship begins in the heart. True worship begins in the sacrifices that we offer up. And the sacrifice that is reasonable for us to offer up is ourselves. A living sacrifice, which is our reasonable service. Tonight He gave Himself for us. And we ought to be willing to give ourselves for Him. So tonight, are we worshiping God? What have you given up for Him? What is it that you can look over your life and say, these things I've sacrificed, and I'm willing to give up anything? Is there any line in your life? Let me ask you this one. Ask it to you this way. Is there any line in your life or place in your life where you've drawn a line and that God can't cross that line? I'm not giving this part of me up. I heard an old man one day. I'm not going to call his name. And the reason I mention it is because it hit close to home. But he basically made the statement that I'm not going to give up my snuff. That's a little one. I won't get into that. But basically what you're saying is, this is where I draw the line for the Lord. And I'm not going to do any more than this right here. When we draw a line in the sand, I believe sometimes the Lord intentionally pushes us to it. And I'll tell you what He's done to me. He's pushed me to it and then threw me across it. That's what I feel like time to time. Don't tell me where you're going to draw the line. I'll make you give up. Any place that I've ever drawn the line, the Lord has intentionally made me give that up. Tonight, what is it that you've sacrificed for Him? That's where true worship begins. If you want to know, do I really worship the Lord? Do you really worship the Lord tonight? What are you sacrificing to Him? What are you willing to offer Him? What is it of yourself that you are not willing to give up for His sake? While we have a verse of a song.